Hey, good morning, friends. This is Josh here. Welcome to another morning meditation. Hope you had a great night's rest and you didn't get blown away yesterday. The wind was crazy, at least at my house. But today we're studying a new parable, and we are studying the parable of the barren fig tree. And you can find this gospel in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Those are called the synoptic gospels. They mean seen together. Because they're all very similar in their story. John is not synoptic because he's writing with a different intention. But what's interesting about this parable is Luke is the only writer who captures Jesus using the barren fig tree as an actual parable. In Matthew and Mark, it's captured as literal actions that Jesus curses a fig tree. And so I'm going to read from Mark today, just to mix it up, but also because Mark is a little bit more detailed in his account, and so I just feel like it's a better text to go off of. So I'll be reading from Mark chapter 11, verse 12, and it reads like this. The next day, after leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. From far away, he noticed a fig tree in leaf, or in bloom. So he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing except leaves, since it wasn't the season for figs. So he said to it, "No one will ever again eat your fruit!" Exclamation point. His disciples heard this. They came into Jerusalem after entering the temple. They threw out those who were there. He goes on to throw out the money changers and all of that. And then it picks up as he's leaving the city the very next day, early in the morning, as Jesus and his disciples were walking along. They saw the fig tree withered from the root up. Peter remembered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look how the fig tree you cursed has dried up." Jesus responded to them, "Have faith in God!" Exclamation point. I assure you that whoever says to this mountain, "Be lifted up and thrown into the sea," it doesn't waver, but believes that what is said will really happen, it will really happen. Therefore I say to you, whatever you pray for or ask for, believe and you will receive it, and it will be so for you. And whenever you stand up to pray, if you have something against anyone, forgive, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you of your wrongdoings. Now, it seems almost a little silly that Jesus would curse this tree for not having any fruit on it. But it does say that it wasn't the season for figs. And so if we look at this very literally, it's confusing because it doesn't make sense. Jesus approaches a tree and it's not the season for figs. And lo and behold, it doesn't have any figs on it, and he gets upset and curses it. That's not really what's happening here. What's happening here is much deeper. It's much more symbolic. And so if we look at the fig tree in leaf, is what it says, or in bloom, what we might take from that is a symbolic reference to Jerusalem. So this is during Jesus' last week, and he's moving about Jerusalem. He's having these debates with the religious scholars and the Pharisees and things, and it's not long before he's crucified. And so during this time, he's revealing in total transparency that his messianic mission is the redemption of the world. And so he's making this reference for his disciples that Israel is like the fig tree in bloom. It is, on the outside, it looks healthy. It looks like it's functioning properly, and that there is likely to be fruit. So a fig tree that blooms early has sweeter figs in it, on it. But he gets closer, and the closer he gets, he realizes there's no fruit at all. Again, very similar to Israel, who looks good on the outside, but isn't really producing any spiritual fruit, because mainly that they have not been able to recognize Jesus as the Messiah, who's been written about and prophesied about and is there with them now, they're unable to recognize him. So he makes this sort of symbolic curse on the tree. Goes, drives out the money changers. The next day, they're walking out of the city, and Peter's like, oh my gosh, check that out. The tree is withered from the root up. Rabbi, look at that. And then Jesus responds with something about prayer, which is kind of an odd response to Peter's exclamation about noticing this tree. And he says, whatever you pray for, whatever you ask for in my name, it'll be granted to you. If you say to the mountain, jump, and it jumps. If you say to the mountain, move, and it moves into the ocean. I mean, these are the kind of references and metaphors and things that talk about a deep reverence and commitment for prayer and believing in what you pray. Now, back to the fig tree for a second. There's also this notion that, like, we are created beings, and like every other created being, we have a purpose. In the case of the fig tree, the purpose is to produce figs. In the case of an apple tree, it's apples, right? But in the case of human beings, our purpose is to have a relationship with God, to enter into that relationship through Jesus Christ, God's Son, who came here to reconcile the world to him. And so when we don't have that relationship with Jesus, when we don't have a relationship with God, we are like a barren fig tree. On the outside, we are still God's creation, only we're not living out our intended purpose. We're fruitless. There's no fruit. And so Jesus' curse on the fig tree is both kind of a symbolic curse against Israel. No one's going to eat your fruit again, talking about that generation and how that generation is going to stand condemned in a way, because condemned, like, they missed it. They totally missed it. They missed God with them, Emmanuel. Now, let's take it a step further. So when we don't live into our potential, when we don't live into our purpose, what happens? Well, in the case of a relationship with God, we're not really living, right? We're eking out an existence, but we're not fully alive if you don't have a relationship with God. What else happens if you don't live into your purpose? Well, if you're a mom or a dad or somebody who is in a leadership position, or you have some function and you don't perform that function, you don't live into your responsibilities, you don't honor your responsibilities by being fully present with your family, or being the best that you can be in your responsibilities, then again, you're like the barren fig tree, right? So we all have these responsibilities, we all have these titles and these things that we've acquired, and when we don't live into them, we're really disappointing a lot of people who are depending on us for various things. On the macro level, if we don't have a relationship with God, again, we're not really living, we're just eking out an existence. So I'd like for you to consider that today. Consider Jesus' words as he's observing this fig tree in bloom, something that looks like it's going to have sweet fruit on it, but then it gets closer, and he gets closer, and then there's no fruit. So how do you look on the outside? Do you look like a stand-up Christian? Do you behave? Are you saying the right things? You're doing the right things? You're going through the motions so that on the outside you look great, but maybe you're not spiritually alive inside? Maybe you don't have a relationship with Jesus? Maybe your relationship with God is on the fritz for whatever reason? If it is, I encourage you to take that to God in prayer. Take it to God in prayer and examine how you're living the rest of your life in your responsibilities. Are you showing up? Are you doing it? Are you bringing it? Are you honoring your responsibilities and those that you care for? Or do you just look good on the outside and that's about it? So I hope you find it helpful, guys. Thanks for all of your encouragement. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll get to them. Otherwise, I'll see you here tomorrow. I love you. Bye.